G'day, I'm Sean and welcome back to the CarExpert Podcast. It's 2025 and James Wong is joining me. How are you, mate?
Good, thank you. New Year, same me.
I know, but new CarExpert Podcast because we are back. Sincere apologies, the end of last year was quite busy for the CarExpert team. As a matter of fact, a lot of the time you would walk into our office and find maybe one or two people here. So producing a podcast was very difficult. The guys were all over the place, but we are back with some semi-regular programming for you. And we're going to kick off with VFACTS this week. We're also going to talk about the new Model Y that's just been revealed. And we're going to talk about the new Toyota HiLux that was spotted recently. But James, let's talk a little bit about you first. One of your favourite topics, I know. What'd you get up to over the Christmas break, mate?
Actually, not a whole lot. I did a little bit of driving. So we cycled through a few cars over the break, but I spent a lot of time in the Mustang Dark Horse, which you can't actually buy anymore.
Well, you know, at least you got to trial it.
Yeah, and it was the first time I'd driven it since it launched, because there's been a number of delays on those cars since it got launched to the media and to America ages ago. And the Dark Horse was the pinnacle, like the track model that we never got with the previous ones. You know, they used to do like the Shelby 350Rs and that kind of thing. And this is sort of our closest thing we have to that. And it was so cool. It was in that really nice, deep, smoky blue color. It's got the body kit and all these unique appointments to it that are different to a GT or an EcoBoost one. And it just got so many looks. Now, in fairness, it is a $100,000 Mustang.
Is that what it is? It costs $100,000?
It's $104,000, $105,000 for the manual, which is a lot of money. And I don't know if I would be willing to spend that myself. And
not that you can, because you can't buy one anyway.
Well, that's true. But you could probably option up a GT with a number of things to make it look like that or as close to that as possible. It's a beautiful car. I loved the V8. Because V8 is so rare now as well, to get one that sounds like that was really, really cool. And to feel like a movie star when you rock up at the lights or in a car park and people are like, oh, what's that? Is that the new Mustang? That was really cool. I just don't know if it was necessarily quite as sharp and that much of a step forward from like a ride and handling perspective as I thought it was going to be, because the Dark Horse was always pitched as the more track ready one. It still feels like a very strong or a very big overhaul of the last one, which, you know, the tech in it's great. One of the things that I loved about it was you can, there's some like heritage digital dials that you can do. So you can actually change it to have like the classic.
I've got a bone to pick with that, I really do.
Okay, well tell me what it is.
You can't claim heritage dials and then have them be digital. That sort of defeats the purpose, doesn't it?
That's true, but it means you can sort of like have a different one every week, because there are so many different styles in there, but you can have like a 67 Mustang, like the old style dials in there, and they look really accurate in terms of the design.
Do they bounce up and down as you go along like old ones used to as well?
I don't remember because I was looking at the roads.
Right, that's probably good.
But you can also get like the old SVT Cobra and the Fox body one, and it's just like a really cool thing to have, because you know, there's so many screens in cars these days, and it seems some manufacturers are just not very creative with what they do with them, and there's a lot of blank space when you have like infinite possibilities of what you can do with them. And I think that was props to Ford for putting that in there, because I guess that's a nice way of paying respects to the Mustang lineage, while also implementing new tech in one of its most iconic models.
Well, I think it's I don't know if it's destined to become a collector's model, given that there's 1,000. That's quite a lot of cars when you think about it. What I have seen on Facebook Marketplace is a number of them pop up for $130,000, $140,000 with 0 kilometers on them. So there are some opportunistic sellers out there that got their hands on them and are trying to hawk them off. We'll see. If you are one of the people that bought a Dark Horse off Facebook Marketplace for $130,000, please write to us, podcast@carexpert.com.au. I'd like to hear why. Anyway, look, let's get into VFACTS, because we're talking about 2024 as a whole. I know we said new podcast, but we do need to look at last year, because there is some very important numbers. Biggest year on record, right?
Yeah, I told you that it was going to be a bigger year than previously. I know that there was a lot of naysayers saying that there was going to be some decline. And to be fair, there was some decline in the second half of the year as things stabilized a little bit. And I know that there's a number of things around cost of living and fuel prices and all that kind of stuff. But how incredible that we got another record. It was like 1,200,000 vehicles or something like that.
1,237,287 new cars delivered to driveways in 2024. That is an obscene number. And I did a bit of back of the envelope maths on this one. That works out to be one car around every 26 seconds.
That's insane.
It's an insane number.
And considering the size of our market on a global scale, the fact that we're doing that many units a year still is very impressive. So mixed fortunes for a number of brands and models though, which I guess we'll go into shortly. But there was, I think in terms of the overall growth, it was like 0.2, 0.3%. So not a whole lot of growth in the big scheme of things. But given for the longest time we were talking about, sales declines and all that kind of thing, and it really depended on which segments and powertrain types you were looking at where that was really hit and miss. But, I think this coming year in 2025 will probably be where we see that consistent decline now that we've seen the peak. And we're probably seeing also a stabilization of supply from a lot of manufacturers, because I think there's a number of brands that have introduced new models, whether they're electric, hybrid or whatever, where there's been a really, really high level of demand and sustained over a really long period of time, where, people may have bought these cars in 2023 and not delivered them until this year, or had them ordered in January and didn't get them until November, December. There's be so many different scenarios there. But this coming year is also going to be so interesting because we have so many new models and brands coming into the market.
Don't we just? Yeah.
Yeah. So heaps of new competitors from China, a load of electric vehicles from a number of brands, Legacy, Challenger, the like. We're seeing a lot of new plug-in hybrids. We're seeing new hybrids, and we've also got the added element of the new vehicle emissions standards from the government. So we've got actual emissions regulations coming into force this year. So we've got a really big, hot pot of change coming in 2025. So it'll be really interesting to see where it goes from here.
And that's going to hurt some, but help some as well. So Absolutely. We'll see. We're going to talk winners and losers. So let's start off with the winners, and we'll just go with the brands first. Toyota sold nearly a quarter of the cars on that list. I mean, that is 241,296 cars, a 12% increase. And a lot of that came from RAV4 coming back online, didn't it?
Yeah, so RAV4 had a much better year in terms of supply as well as delivery. So it returned about 58,000 registrations. It was an all-time record for that, and was basically one of the driving forces behind Toyota's growth this year. The waiting times have come down, and it's across their model lines as well. So you've seen new Camry come in, a slew of updates across its range, and the Prado came back. So after a year of basically not having one of its best-selling SUVs, it sort of replaced it with another one. And it's not very widely reported, but Toyota's hybrid range alone accounted for nearly 120,000 vehicles in Australia last year. So if you had Toyota Hybrid as its own brand, it would actually be number 1 and 2 for Toyota, and then Toyota Hybrid, which is insane.
That is remarkable. And I mean, considering that there are a number of models in the Toyota range that are hybrid only now. So Corolla Cross, they're all they're just moving to
basically all
hybrid
of
only.
Basically all of the passenger vehicle range that has a hybrid option went hybrid only in 2024. So it started off with some of the SUVs and the smaller stuff, and then they moved on to Kluger, Corolla, and that's still despite that, because it obviously meant that the price of entry was a little bit higher after that. Those models still return really, really good figures. So, props to Toyota. They've been criticized for leaning on their hybrid stuff, maybe, and not so much the electric stuff. But, you look at the numbers and the numbers don't lie.
Numbers do not lie. Well, numbers that also don't lie are for Ford, cracking the 100,000 mark, coming in second place. I mean, considering that I know they have a number of cars in their lineup, but they really only sell 2. That is a remarkable number for Ford as well.
Yes, and even though they came second overall, they had the best-selling vehicle in the country, which was the Ranger. Ranger and Everest have been standout this year, and even though Ranger was technically down by a couple of hundred units on last year, it held really strong. And Ford, cracking the 100 barrier, overtaking Mazda for the first time in ages. So Mazda losing second spot for the first time, as long as I can remember. I think when I started as a journo 9-10 years ago, Mazda was still number 2, off the back of the Mazda 3 being the most popular car in the country at the time. That's a really strong growth there. And Everest was Australia's favourite large SUV for the year too, and had a record year. The new generation model has just been a runaway success for them. So it's good to see that Ford's at least got 2 models that are doing really well. Hopefully they maybe round out their range a little bit more, because with these new emissions standards coming in, a lot of people are buying the V6 diesels, which don't quite meet that cap that's coming in for those new commercial standards. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. They have the Ranger plug-in hybrid coming in very soon.
Yeah, but are they going to sell enough of them to offset that amount, or are we going to see a bit of a price increase on Ranger?
Well, I guess what a lot of brands can do is they can either take the hit and maybe invest in those new technologies by slimming the gap in price, or coming up with ways of making those cars more attractive. We've still currently got incentives in place for plug-in hybrids and electric vehicles. The plug-in hybrid incentives, where the FBT is basically waived for novated leases, is coming up at the end of March. But given we have an election coming soon as well, that may be extended as part of that. So there's a number of different factors that still aren't locked in yet. But yeah, I think, Ford has a couple of, at least one electric car at the moment that is underperforming in terms of sales volume, the Mustang Mach-E, and I think that could be doing a lot better, and that would help them offset that quite a bit. But yeah, you have brands like Ford, which are very heavily reliant on higher emitting vehicles that, with these emission standards coming in this year, could be hurt quite a lot.
Well, I think expect to see AdBlue roll out across the 4-cylinder Ranger range over the next year or two. That's going to be one way they try and help offset that. Let's talk Mazda. Mazda had a slew of new cars come out over the last 18 months. They've done well. I mean, they still delivered about 96,000 cars, but that's about 4,000 down on last year. It didn't help them maintain number 2. Do we know, is it the price of these new models? Because a lot of the new CX range, the 60, 70, 80 and 90 are a fair lick more expensive than the old CX range, which is 3, 5, 7, 8, I can't remember.
Yeah, 7 has been around for a while, but the 8 and 9 were replaced by the 80 and 90 effectively, and then you have the 60 and 70 come in as new propositions. I think what really didn't help Mazda this past year was the lack of electrified options. A lot of people are looking at hybrid models, and if you see the SUV standings, RAV4, Outlander, Tucson, Sportage all had a really strong performance based on electrified models. The CX-5 is still only petrol. And so the fact that it managed to stay fairly constant and Mazda still held strong despite the fact that, most of the CX 60, 70, 80, 90 range is mild hybrid with the option of plug-in. They have a strong mix of plug-in sales, to be fair, in the CX60 range, but they don't have an EV still. They killed the MX-30. There's some of the other plug-in hybrid and hybrid options that they have overseas they haven't brought here yet. So it'll be interesting to see what they do throughout the course of this year and next to meet those new emission standards, but also try to capitalize on increased demand for hybrid, plug-in hybrid and electric vehicles.
Well, Kia led the Koreans with 81,000 deliveries. Mitsubishi jumped up into 5th place, 74,000. They've knocked Hyundai down. So Mitsubishi splitting it, which is a real surprise considering we saw the Triton didn't do as well as I think they hoped it would do. But it must be a lot of their passenger cars that are really picking up the slack there.
Yeah, I think the Outlander was a really standout stuff for them. The Outlander moved into the top 10 and quite easily into the top 10. It was second in the mid-size SUV segment overall behind the RAV4. So that's been a really good model for them. And you see them everywhere. And we had one as a long-termer, and it's a brilliant car. It offers the plug-in hybrid option as well as 7 seats, which is fairly unique in that end of the market. So they've found their niche there, or not so much a niche because it's fairly mainstream, but I think Mitsubishi's been doing really well with the Outlander. I think there's some room for improvement in their other models which will help them go further. But it's interesting about Hyundai because Kia had another all-time record hitting 80,000 units for the first time and had the Sportage as well, mid-size SUVs. Basically, if you have a mid-size SUV and an electrified version of that mid-size SUV, you're bound for success. And not Ford, because Ford doesn't do mid-size SUV,
not anymore.
but Toyota, Kia, and Mitsubishi, and Hyundai, to be fair. Hyundai was down, but the Tucson sales were up really high this year. Those are all examples of how that has really helped them.
Yeah, so Hyundai coming in 671,000. I mean, that's still a great number. It's a big drop down to MG with only 50,000 deliveries. Now, I think that a lot of people may have thought the new MG3 and the new ZS were going to help, but it didn't really bump up the sales quite as much as they thought.
No, I think the MG3, unfortunately, was just because of all the new tech and all the electrification with that new hybrid model, it's bumped up the price to the point where it's just the gap is not that wide anymore, and so I think they've still been selling the old one too right through to the end of the year, and the ZS has the same issue where they've launched with hybrid first, and so the starting price is still above what the old top spec model was. And when the Chinese brands traded so much on value and sharp pricing, once you take that out of the equation, and it's not to say that they're not good value cars, but once you take that price gap out of the equation and the legacy manufacturers have sort of had to be sharpening their pens a little bit to be more competitive, you can just see that people have more choice. And I think a lot of people are still choosing, and you look at the top 5 still, they're still choosing the big name brands that come from Korea and Japan and everything. And so I think MG maybe has some work to do there.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Isuzu Ute, I mean, they are probably getting my shout out for the year. Coming in 8th place, 48,000 deliveries. They literally only sell 2 cars. I mean, that is absolutely phenomenal.
And they're not cheap cars either.
No.
Like, you have the starting price of around 50 grand, moving all the way to around 70. But Australians love utes, and even though they love mid-size SUVs, they love utes more. Ranger was number 1, HiLux was number 3, D-Max wasn't far behind either.
It's 4th.
Yeah, exactly.
It says it all.
So the top 3 utes in the country are in the top 4 nameplates, and so Isuzu's got a really great formula there. They've got some electrification options in the pipeline. They haven't confirmed anything for us yet, but they'll be one of those brands that really needs to be careful with these upcoming emission standards, because they can still keep selling cars, but if they take hits on the fines if they don't meet emissions caps, rather than passing them on to customers, they're playing a really delicate balance there.
Absolutely. Rounding out the 10, Nissan in 9th. GWM, which I think has amalgamated all of its brands back under the GWM banner now, probably helping boost the numbers there. That's our top 10 brands, but let's dive into models, because we've already said Ranger, 62,500 deliveries in the year. I'm not going to say easily number 1, but because it was slightly down in the year before, but it is a fair bit ahead of RAV4 with 58,000. HiLux, it is dropping. It's down 7,600 deliveries to 53,499, which is still a lot of HiLuxes, let's be honest.
It's a lot of HiLuxes, and when you look at the next best, which was the D-Max with 30,000, you can still see that despite the fact the HiLux is old, despite the fact the HiLux lacks a proper electrification option, it's not exactly all that cheap, but they still do have a lot of 4x2 mix in there. It still leads the 4x2 ute segment by quite a long shot. I think Toyota's probably just letting it ride the wave until whenever they can get onto a new one, which we'll talk about later. But yes, it's down a lot, but it's offset by the fact they're delivering so many RAV4s. I think Toyota's going to be happy with its results regardless.
Absolutely, and like you said, new Prado's just come online, new Camry's just come online. Prado didn't actually make it into the top 20 here at all for 2024, but I think there was quite a gap between when the 150 sort of ran out and the 250 started.
Well, I think the 150 pretty much ran out at the conclusion of 2023, so they went for 8 to 10 months without a Prado in there, and I think what they said they expect to deliver some like 37,000 units in the 12 months from when it first launched in October through to October the following year. So based on that volume alone, it would be very quickly challenging Everest for the top large SUV segment. And
That's
then also
crazy.
in that top 20 as well, because Everest did 26,000 units for the calendar year. If Prado hits 30, it's already back in the top 5.
And that is insane, given I think Everest starts at around 50, and Prado starts much closer to 70. So that's a big price difference there. Look, like you said, D-Max 4th, Outlander 5th, Everest in 6th, Corolla, the mighty Corolla, still in the top 10, 24,000 deliveries, far from its heyday, but still cracking along.
But it is the only passenger car to be in the top 10.
And the only full hybrid range. Model range as well.
True, but there were still petrol cars counted in that. But yes, the RAV4 and the Corolla have a very, very high hybrid mix, probably to the tune of like 80 to 90% at this point. So it just shows you that, if you can get the electrification and the pricing right, people will still buy them. And Corolla still outsold CX-5 and ZS, which are priced around the same.
Yeah, and Corolla sales were up 4,000 vehicles, more vehicles in 2024 than 2023. So a bunch of Corollas got found in a warehouse somewhere and were brought out.
Probably, or we just got more production of the hybrid that people are ordering. So
yeah, unfortunately, I don't think there's 4,000 GR Corollas on the road, disappointingly. We can dream. Look, and that pretty much rounds us out. Yeah, CX-5, MG ZS, Kia Sportage, that's our top models. I wanted to touch on some losers, and let's just jump back to brands. If we look at the bottom of the list and we take out all of the supercars because they're low volume things, there's a couple of interesting ones in there. So Jaguar, Jaguar's not really a loser because they were up 27%. They sold an extra 162. So people trying to get a Jaguar before it all changes.
Get their current Jaguars before they do their big rebrand,
Look, the big ones, Polestar down basically 2,200 cars from the previous year, only delivering 1,700 vehicles. Now they did have 2 new models come online at the end of 2020. Well, that's sort of coming on this year in 2025, but it was pretty much just one model of car they had to sell all year.
Yes, and admittedly, the Polestar 2, while it has been updated a number of times, is getting quite old. And so I think based on December's numbers, they had quite a few Polestar 4s get registered. Which is their new coupe SUV. It's sort of like they're pitching it as like an electric Macan rival. And if if their predictions are correct, that car might become their new favorite one, or at least the top selling one if they can sort of keep consistent volume with that. It'll be interesting to see what they can do with their other models because like I like the Polestar products. All of them are quite good to drive.
Well, essentially Volvos, right?
Yeah, exactly. Volvo and Polestar are very closely linked still in a number of ways. And I think, given they're only electric cars and electric sales are falling, that can also contribute to it because people just aren't looking at them anymore. So I think this coming year will be a better idea of how their stuff performs because they've got a full range of cars. The Polestar 5 will also go on sale at some point in 2025, may not start deliveries until 2026, but that's their new Taycan flagship sedan thingy that is quite out there in terms of design and also has really big performance claims. So, and I think, Polestar being one of the, pitching itself as a premium brand probably isn't chasing volume quite as hard. So I don't think they're necessarily too worried, at least in Australia, but given Tesla is still by far the top selling electric car brand in Australia, I think the other manufacturers will want to be catching up to that soon.
Look, let's touch on Tesla quickly. They did 38,347 deliveries through 2024, down 7,700 cars the year before. Now, there was a new Model 3 that came on, but then everyone was hearing rumors about a new Model Y, and then there was all of the talk about resale value being an issue. Do you think people let me phrase this in a way that won't upset anyone.
I think you're going to upset people anyway.
Upset anyone. Look, no, do you think the early adopters have all adopted, and now it's just more the generic punters that are coming in, and they're just not as interested in Tesla as maybe, say, like the fans of Tesla are?
Yeah, that's probably a really good way of framing the question. I think, early adopters, the early adopters of Tesla, I think, had adopted it a long time ago. Like, the Model 3 was first revealed in 2017 or something like that, which is like nearly 8 years ago now. And, the first cars started coming here quite a number of years ago. So people who have wanted one have sort of gone out and gotten one. The same thing happened with Model Y. There was a lot of anticipation around the SUV version. There was a huge rush of people going in to buy them. And to be fair, its volumes have still been pretty good this past year too. There were a lot of things around, particularly with the Model Y, given how competitive that mid-size electric SUV space is, a number of price adjustments that, peeved off people that were looking to buy or had just ordered one, and then the next day, like 10 grand got shaved off the price. And then there was also the prospects of that new, Juniper update coming, which was actually revealed in this past week, which we'll talk about later. Yeah, so, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with this updated model because the base pricing is up quite a lot. I know people in the comments have said it's not actually a price rise because you get more stuff as standard or whatever excuse you want, helps you sleep at night. But the fundamental thing is the sticker that the car starts with is about $7.5 grand more than it was before. Yes, it gets more stuff than it did before, but there are a number now of competitors that have so much more breathing room because everyone's been trying to aim for that $55,000, $56,000 starting point that the Model Y had as the benchmark. And now the goalposts have essentially shifted because if brands can get in under the 60 grand mark and they undercut it by a good enough margin, it gives them some breathing room. So I'll be really interested to see with the first deliveries of the Model Y starting in May for this new model, May, June. It'll be interesting to see from the second half of the year whether we get an influx of these new ones coming in, if they're people that have either held off buying one, the old one at least, or whether they're existing owners that got them very early that now want the new one. It'll be interesting to see because the Model 3 hasn't quite taken off with that new update, despite the fact that it's been much improved in a lot of ways. No,
and Model Y did manage to crack into the top 20 for the year, but Model 3 is nowhere to be seen up in those numbers. So Model Y did 21,253, and you can do the math on that. Model 3 only did about 16,000 by comparison, so it's quite a lot less.
Yeah.
So anyway, look, it's not all doom and gloom for Tesla. I mean, I think they're still selling plenty of cars. I think they're doing perfectly fine, and let us know. Are you ordering a new Model Y Juniper?
The launch series or whatever they call it.
Launch edition, yes, yeah, that one. Look, a couple of others that haven't done so well. I mean, I think we knew Citroen were never going to do very well considering,
they did.
Said goodbye to them, yeah. Peugeot down quite a lot as well. One that's going to sting for you, my friend, Cupra. They are down 1,426 deliveries year on year. I mean,
yes.
as an enthusiast of the Volkswagen group, and specifically, I know how much you love the Coupras. Do you know why they're down so much? Because they only did 2,339.
Yeah, so the sales of their core model lines, especially Formentor, were down quite a bit on the previous year. I think that's also because the facelifted models were revealed around mid-year or third quarter, and they're not coming until for another couple of months.
Yeah,
so
typical Volkswagen thing where Europe gets them and we see them and have to wait a long time.
Yeah, and so I don't want to peddle brand messaging, but the feedback we got when I asked them directly about it when I drove the new Tavascan is that they believe that people, sort of like the same thing, the initial rush of early adopters have gone out and bought one already. There hasn't been a substantial update since then. These new facelifts bring a lot of quite tangible changes to things that people have criticised the original set for, and also the PHEVs get double the range. So they'll have a really strong plug-in hybrid, and they're adding a new electric vehicle to the range and an extra version of the Born, which probably fits more in their performance ethos that they've been pitching for quite a while. So I think, from about mid-year as well, that Cupra will have a really solid foundation. They're expanding their range. They've got the new Terramar, which is now a mid-size SUV, plays better in that segment than the existing Ateca does, because the Ateca's a bit old. And then having the Tavascan as a mid-size coupe SUV electric vehicle will probably give them more of a foot in that market as well, despite the fact that electric vehicle sales are sort of waning a little bit.
Okay. A couple of others that are suffering, I suppose Ram, it's a long way from their heyday. They're down 43%. Only did 3,852 deliveries, down 2,981 year on year. The glory days of the $150,000 instant asset write-off are far behind us, and I think Ram are probably feeling the sting of that more than most, aren't they?
Probably, yeah, because they've got a very small range, and on top of that, they've also revealed, again, another company where they've revealed a substantial update. We've got these new inline-six twin-turbo models coming and some good tech upgrades. People are waiting for them. We know they're coming very, very soon. So, I think it's just another thing where people are holding off, because that is a very substantial amount of money to pay. You're paying, six figures for this big thing, and you're probably going to hold on to it for a while. So you probably want the newest version of it and the best version of it that you can get. So I'm assuming we'll see a little bit of an uptick once those new models come online.
But I think expect to see some really good run-out deals on the V8 Rams. So if you want a V8 pickup truck, I think Chevy are probably going to follow suit very soon by going 6-cylinder, so get in and get a Ram while you can. Look, Skoda was down. They're a fairly low volume brand. They did 5,000 deliveries. They're down about 3,000 year on year. SsangYong are down. They went through a whole rebrand, so they're now KGM SsangYong.
KGM SsangYong in Australia, yeah. KGM Mobility globally. They launched the Torres quite quietly.
Yes, I forgot that car existed until I saw one the other day.
And it's very popular in Korea, mind you. Okay. A lot of people buying it there. There's an electric version as well, which I think is on the cards for us, which would be an interesting addition to the range. Having driven it, it's probably not a gangbusters cool thing or a segment breaking thing that we perhaps thought it might be. But it's something different. It looks cool. SsangYong's still working on expanding its range with new models and giving it all their cars the new face that they're putting out there, which is sort of almost Jeep inspired, which I think people like the look of. But
they got to be careful. Mahindra learnt the hard way about that.
They did. Well, that's why they just haven't brought in a Wrangler knockoff. Yes. But yeah, I think SsangYong, despite the fact that the other two major Korean brands have been doing really well, SsangYong's been underperforming in that space. I think once they find their feet and also give a bit of a point of difference as to why you go SsangYong over some of their contemporaries, they might find some better footing.
And I'd love to see an updated Musso Ute. Hopefully one of those comes along soon, especially given that we've got the Tasman.
Yes.
Say what you will. The Tasman's coming out. We're now going to see some Korean Utes. I'd like to see an updated Musso, because that is quite an underdog of a car, but it's actually pretty good.
And same thing with the Rexton as well. The Rexton is a really good budget alternative to something like a Ford Everest, and it's unloved in terms of sales and probably doesn't get as much marketing as it could, but that's a really lovely car that people just don't buy enough of in that segment. So I think, if some more major updates can come to those cars, get some marketing behind them, because
heaven forbid.
Because people don't even realize they exist sometimes. So I think that's also an important thing for brands to remember, is that, you can have the best car in the world or the best product in the world. And this goes for a number of different industries. You can have the best product, but if you don't tell people why you should buy it or get yourself in front of eyeballs, it's going to be very hard for you to make that sale.
I want to touch on a couple of more premium brands, let's call it that. I'm going to include Volkswagen in that. They're down 7,341 deliveries, 16% year on year. it's just those cars are all getting quite old now in the Volkswagen lineup, aren't
the
they?
Tiguan and Tiguan Allspace are basically in run out now. Their new generation versions have been revealed. Same thing, Europe has already gotten them. We're very far behind. They should be here in the first half of the year. Well, no, the Tiguan will be here first half of the year. The Tayron, which replaces the Allspace, is the 7-seat alternative, will be here in the latter half of this year. So I think the same thing for Skoda. Basically, all the Volkswagen Group brands, they've seen long tail launch timings for some of the substantial updates. And, I think T-Roc has maintained a good level of volume, but Golf has sort of fallen off a little bit. So they're sort of going through a restructure now where some of their historic icons or volume sellers aren't quite doing what they are, and we're waiting for the new versions of their SUVs, which tend to drive that volume these days.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'll see. If the ID cars ever arrive in Australia, maybe that will help
we're
them
still
a
waiting
little
for those.
bit. Let's not mention the ID cars, we'll get in trouble. Mercedes-Benz, they're also down 13.9%, 24,831 deliveries, so down 4,000. I mean, Mercedes are a bit of a tricky one, aren't they? Because they basically make the same car with different levels of leather across the ranges. I mean, when you think about it, so like the GLC was one that we spoke about last year with that insane option, but only had one option pack and it was
Like
$10,000.
$7 to $8 grand, yeah.
But the GLC, the GLE and the GLS, I mean, fundamentally, the car is not that different between the three of them. You just get nicer interior options.
Well, E and S are on the same platform, and the S is basically a bigger version of the E. The GLC is, our C-Class SUV and wagon in one, even though there is a wagon available overseas. Mercedes has been doing their agency sales model with, direct to consumer. They've got the fixed pricing model. I think the big problem for Mercedes at the moment is that their prices are just so high.
And the cars are not living up to it, let's be honest. When you look at what BMW are doing, what Audi are doing, there's some really nice cars with some nice diversity. Yeah. And the Benzes, obviously the V8s are all gone and they're all going to hybrids, but they just don't feel like, I don't know, you get the Mercedes and it just doesn't feel quite like it used to back in the day.
I think there's that element, and it's not to say that they make bad cars, but when your base pricing is 10 to 15 grand on top of a competitor, like a base C class is nudging $100,000 in your driveway. That's a difficult thing for people to accept, which is why you'll see them move to SUVs, because there's a perceived value about getting a bigger, more substantial car. And I think that was evidenced in how Mercedes started bringing in cheaper entry grade versions of various model lines that were previously high volume for them, and then making them cheaper mainstay models. They're looking into bringing more hybrids after saying that no one wanted hybrids, and that's why they went straight to electric. But I don't think people really like the look of their new EQ products because they're all a little bit ugly, to be fair.
A lot of piano black on them too.
Yeah, and they have excellent plug-in hybrids overseas, which have 120, 100 and something kilometers of range, which is something that's still in our market we don't have a lot of. So hopefully they can turn their fortunes around because I think they've lost their way a little bit in Australia, and they've lost the luxury leading spot to BMW, which surely would have the local division going back to head office being like, we need to do something because we can't be losing that spot.
Absolutely. All right, let's go a little bit positive. Some of the rising stars, some brands to look out for this year. Suzuki, they were up 24%, 4,200 vehicles, more vehicles sold year on year. So they did 21,278. Considering they only sell little cars and they only have a fairly limited lineup, pretty decent effort from Suzuki there. And a similar thing for BYD. I mean, obviously their lineup is growing. Shark 6's delivery started yesterday. People are actually getting them in their driveways now.
Yeah.
BYD up 8,000 deliveries year on year, and that's probably due to new models coming online there, isn't it?
Yeah, the C-Line 6 has been a really great success for them. It only launched in July, but it almost was their top seller for the year. Considering, again, there was a lot of naysayers about plug-in hybrids, so I'm going to say I'm right again. Not just with volume, but with plug-in hybrids as well. The C-Line 6 has quickly become Australia's favourite PHEV. It overtook the Outlander plug-in hybrid for the year as well, despite only being on sale for half the year.
Well, it was a fair bit cheaper too, I think.
It is, but then, good on them for getting a product in for that size and segment, but also being substantially cheaper than what was the previous favourite. And the rest of their range, particularly the Seal, stayed pretty strong. They've got a lot of new products coming in this year. So we've got the Shark 6, as you mentioned, which they took 5,000 or 6,000 orders very early on.
I crashed the website.
Yeah, crashed the website. They just announced that the Sea Lion 7, which is more of a Model Y mid-size SUV electric competitor, coming in February, and they've promised a starting price below $60,000. So, if people are loving the Sea Lion 6, there might be a lot of people that want a full electric version that will go for the Sea Lion 7. And there's a number of other vehicles that they're, potentially bringing. They're looking at bringing like the Yang Wang brand here with that U8, that massive, futuristic G-Wagon style thing. There's a number of cars that they're looking at bringing here. And there seems to be a lot of excitement about BYD products. I think because they're so well known for their plug-in hybrid and electric vehicles globally and have really good backing by some solid investments in their battery tech. The LFP battery tech is something that people have seemed to really educate themselves on and trust. I think that that's something that they're really leveraging at the moment, and I think this year we'll see some growth for them as well. And they just announced a range of price adjustments or big cuts where now they've got the cheapest electric vehicle in the country. The Dolphin now starts from $29,990, and the Atto 3 I think has been reduced to $39,990 for the base model. So they've got some really, really affordable options for people that perhaps before may not have wanted to make the jump, but now might want to. Yeah. And they've got all this new product coming in. I can't see why BYD won't be one of those breakout ones where they continue growing for a period of time. Well,
they've barely scratched the surface of the aquarium, so there's plenty more fish in the sea, in the BYD sea, I suppose they can go through. A couple of final shout outs. Porsche. I'm really disappointed that it's 977 instead of 911. But Porsche up 16% year on year, delivering 7,029 vehicles. I'd say a lot of that was run out Macans, people trying to get their hands on a petrol one before the electric vehicle was just arrived here, I suppose.
Yeah, and they still have dealer stock available for people to buy probably through this next quarter of the year, but then basically that's it. So I'll be interested to see what happens after that because, beyond Macan, the Cayenne's quite expensive, so the volume's not as high. The new electric Macan is quite a bit more expensive. It's about 30 grand up on the base pricing, which
and we can assume the new electric Boxster is going to be significantly more expensive than the old petrol Boxster.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens with them, but they're about to launch a new 911. They've got a number of variants of various model lines coming in as well that people might have already ordered. So, keeping in mind that VFACTS does deliveries, not orders. Yes. So we can speculate all we want. It just depends on what their order banks are like and when they can get them into the country. Yeah.
One final shout out. This is the most odd thing that happened, I think, all of 2024. Dodge used to make a car called the Journey. Hateful thing, very ugly, didn't drive very well. They stopped making that or selling it in Australia in 2017, which was 8 years ago. They somehow delivered 6 new Journeys in 2024. Which means there are 6 people out there that found these on dealer lots and thought, you know what, that is the car for me. And if you're one of those 6 people, please write to us. Let us know what drugs were you taking when you saw that car. I'd really like to know because they weren't good when they were new and they're still not very good now. So anyway, that pretty much wraps up VFACTS. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to ask you to be very brave and give me a prediction of where you think it's going to go. I know you sort of touched on it at the start, but let's get a prediction of where you think new vehicle sales are going to go in 2025?
I think they'll be down for the year, and I'm quite confident they'll be down. I think we'll see decline of maybe somewhere between 10 and 20%. That's my prediction.
Dropping under the million, you reckon?
It'll be. I think we'll probably return very close to that million sales mark, registrations.
I hope it's more than a million with that.
I think we'll see it return closer to the million. I think we'll see a very interesting shift in the top 10 brands and nameplates with all these emissions regulations and all these new models and makes coming in. And I think I have a feeling that the FEV brakes will be extended. So if that is the case, I think we'll see hybrids and FEVs continue to climb quite exponentially relative to electric vehicles. But I think we'll see a much more dense mix of different makes and models in those segments, as opposed to seeing more brake. Like I think Toyota will still lead by quite a bit, but I think we'll see a much stronger mix of different brands and different models in that as well.
Okay, something to look forward to. I think one thing, because we can look at the used car market to get a bit of a sense of what happens in the new car market. Used prices, I think, are not dropping. They're adjusting back to where they were. I think the world is sort of righting itself. Do you think that we might see a bit of price reductions across the new car range in a similar vein as sort of, I guess, the world, it comes back to normal sort of pre-COVID levels and the prices sort of adjust back to where they should be?
Yeah, I think we're going to see, actually this maybe can be a tack on to my predictions, that it'll go back to being a buyer's market.
Okay.
So I think, we've got a lot of strong, new competition coming from China, which are going to really challenge the legacy brands in terms of pricing and features. The other part of that is that with these new emissions regulations, some brands are going to be penalised for it, and the penalties start from 1st of July. So a lot of brands are going to be readjusting their lineups and everything to make sure that they're not being hit with fines to the government. And so I think if they can't get their prices down, we'll see like finance deals and things like that. So I think there'll be a lot of incentivizing to keep volumes at a good level, whilst also maintaining a good level of competition with some of these incoming players. So, and there's a lot of new cars coming to market too. So the opportunities are endless.
Well, based on my predictions last year, I'm inclined to agree with you. I think the number's going to go down. I think that we're not going to see the same list of brands on the VFACTS charts come January 2026 as what we see today. I know obviously there's a bunch of new ones coming from China, but I think we're going to see a lot drop off, and even some of those new ones may not be there this time next year. They may not survive. So we'll have to see. I mean, like you said, buyer's market, wallets are going to talk as to whether a car brand makes or breaks when they get here. But speaking of making or breaking, let's talk about the new Toyota HiLux that was recently spied in Thailand, because I think this is going to be very make or break for Toyota's sales, or the HiLux sales this year, because as far as we can tell, it's not that different. And the car that's here has been here for 10 years and 21 years if you actually think about the platform it's based on.
Yeah, it dates back quite a long time. The pictures were interesting because it was very covered up at the front and the rear, but the doors were the same. It'll be interesting to see whether Toyota is trying to engineer some of its new platform technologies under the current body or a variation of the current body, or whether they're just going to give it another facelift to give it some time while it works on the next TNGA-based one. But that would be very odd because there are variations of the same platform on sale in America that have been in production for a long time. So I think it's the Tacoma is the American equivalent, plus the fact the new Prado and a couple of other vehicles are now on that platform. Given the volume of the HiLux, I know that some brands might like to rest on it and minimize the investment while a good thing is still going. But I think just given the current climate in terms of, emissions regulations, the changing of perceptions around legacy brands and incoming challenges, I think Toyota, if they're not doing a proper substantial update where they're doing more to develop the HiLux nameplate as a whole, I think they could be seeing some real challenges in their future if this is just another facelift job, because there needs to be a substantial update in terms of the in-car tech, because one of the reasons the Ranger is doing so well is because the infotainment and driver assistance tech is basically at passenger car and SUV levels now. The HiLux, when you drive it, is quite a bit far behind in terms of like refinement and usability compared to something like a Kluger or a RAV4, for example. And those new versions of its contemporaries available in America have made those jumps. I think the HiLux is in desperate need of that.
Well, we think that it's going to come with the same engine. Unfortunately, we think it's going to have the very active technology again. Yeah. Now, some of the reports suggest that there might actually be electronic power steering finally coming to it, which would be a big leap forward for HiLux, because it is kind of like steering a tugboat when you get behind the wheel after having driven one of the more electrified steering systems like in the Ranger, for instance. But that actually, in theory, should help with the safety systems, which is something that they're really going to need to do, because I think ADR's changed this year and new cars have to have a whole bunch of these systems on board now. And
I think more developed versions of them as well. So I think, if it's more of like a half generational jump where it's quite substantial, but it's not an all new car, that might do it for another 3 or so years until they can get that new generation car. But I think, I guess maybe as well with that same engine, it could be like the Prado where it's a development of that same engine, but you get the mild hybrid stuff and the 8-speed auto, which will help driving refinement quite a bit. And we've seen in the Prado, it can still retain a level of heavy duty capability that buyers expect.
Well, the tow rating's up on the Prado as well.
Exactly. So, and if they can do that and also, increase driving refinement, and on top of that, maybe make the 48 volt technology more widely available across their range, that could see them through for quite some time. Okay. But we'll find out imminently when this update miraculously gets revealed at some point.
And look, when we did a video, we did a story on it last week. I'll put links to those in the description. A lot of people said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, I tell you what, if it ain't broke, why are the sales dropping? That's what I want to know. So there's only one way to tell. When we get the new one comes out and then we look at the VFACTS sales charts, we will know whether it was a successful update or not. Let's touch on the Model Y, because the Model Y, okay. I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on here for a second.
You're being more controversial than me for a nice change.
I know, it's a new year, new me. I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on here for a second, talk about a conspiracy, because these spy photos leaked of the Model Y, like completely naked. We could see the whole car, we could see the light bar across the front, light bar across the back. It was doing some skids in the snow. And then the very next day, Tesla just dropped it on their website. But interestingly, they only dropped on the website in the sort of Asia Pacific markets. Wasn't updated in Europe, wasn't updated in the States at the time. The conspiracy theorist in me thinks Tesla leaked those photos on purpose to drum up a bit of hype before they announce a new car, because there's no way they could whip up a website like that, surely.
Yeah, it's not something that happens overnight. They may have pushed it live a bit earlier than expected based on the fact that there was a leak. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, and I don't want to get into like the political debate and the conspiracy stuff, because otherwise people will drag me in the comments. I do read everything. But given the behavior of the company's head, founder and CEO, the face of it,
company, yes.
Those kinds of things would not surprise me. In terms of the fact that it was only released in select markets, I imagine that these changes are being implemented at the Chinese factory first, which is what supplies this region, whereas America and Europe are served by their own factories, and they may take a little bit more time. As to whether I like the redesign or not, I'm not a particular fan of the look.
I like it more than the previous gen, or the first gen Model Y. I think it actually is quite a good improvement. I thought the first one looked kind of like a duck. Didn't really like the look of it very much.
The current one just looks like it's got a massive monobrow, and I don't know, it sort of looks a bit soulless. And I know, I guess it's sort of inspired by the Cybertruck. So for fans of the brand who can't get their hands on a Cybertruck, they can get like the baby version, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sure they're very similar.
And there's a couple of technical upgrades. So they're both the single motor and the dual motor ones are a little bit quicker to 100 now. They've got a little bit more range thanks to the new aerodynamics.
But before you ask, we don't know the battery sizes yet. That has not been announced. So just to clear that up, no one knows the battery sizes yet, but we're sort of presuming there'll be a similar sort of number.
Yeah, it sounds like they're about the same, but the motors are quicker. So there's that part, and also the fact that you get more, even though the prices are up by about $7-ish grand on the base level, some of the things that were previously optional are currently standard on the launch series. So you can get basically any paint you want, you get the larger wheels, and I think there was something else that was in there too, which would normally amount to about the same amount of money. That
you get the screen in the back now as well.
Screen in the back, and I think you can option electrically adjustable rear seats or something.
Probably.
Something like that. There's a few things in there that perhaps are feedback from current owners that what they wanted to see in the new one, and I imagine that they'll pad the range out with extra variants, and maybe bring in a cheaper base grade and a more expensive performance one eventually.
That'll come,
so that stuff is all going to happen in the coming months. So yeah, like I said earlier, it'll be interesting to see come May, June, whether these changes have resonated with customers in Australia, because the Model Y has obviously been Australia's top selling electric vehicle for basically since it came out. So whether this helps gain ground or loses ground will be really interesting to watch.
Well, what do you guys think? Are you ordering one? Have you put in an order for one? Are you on the fence? Are you going to grab a used one or a run-out model? Because I guarantee you're going to see some amazing prices on the current spec Model Y. If you own a Model Y and you think of selling it, do it now. Just get rid of the thing. Don't try and hold on, because it's going to be bad. Look, that pretty much brings us to the end of our very first episode for 2025. It's felt good to be back, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been nice. I like our little breakfast club style setup here. Maybe I'll bring a mug next week.
Or a martini, whatever works.
It's maybe a bit early for that.
Yeah, maybe a little bit, yes. Look, anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
I guess if we're not doing picks of the week per se, one of the things that I got into over the break was watching Jason Camisa on the Icons. He's got a new series out with Haggerty's ex-Motor Trend. And, he's a really great presenter, and he's done a couple of episodes on the Icons where he takes some things that they're still like with a a US market lens, but some really interesting historical research and that kind of thing. So the one that really caught my attention was the Land Cruiser. For us, it's the Prado, but over in America, it's called the Land Cruiser. And what was interesting is that the new Prado was sort of like the replacement for the 200 series in America, but it's now 4-cylinder, smaller, and not quite as big and brash as the old one. And he goes through a full history lesson of the origins of the Land Cruiser nameplate, how it developed over the years, and then how that lineage split in three to have the big luxury wagon one, the Prado, as well as this rugged 70 series, which he gave us a shout out in Australia saying that we still have it. How lucky are we that we have the OG Land Cruiser here? But a really interesting series of content that I think a lot of enthusiasts will find interesting.
Absolutely, and look, some people like the new Prado, some people don't. I think it's an improvement. It's not a huge improvement, but it's still.
I want the circular lights. Why don't we get the circular lights?
I want the turbo petrol hybrid engine. I think that would make a.
Well, he
big
didn't
difference.
like that one.
Really, what can't be any worse than that diesel that's in there? But you never know.
I don't know. It didn't. Look, I've driven that hybrid system in the new Lexus RX. I didn't love it. It's fast, but I didn't love it. And from the feedback I'm seeing from the North American journalists that are driving that car now, because I think it's only just started hitting media and driveways over in America and Canada, I don't think it's quite as good as we perhaps thought it might be.
Well, there you go. I guess my advice is buy a Lexus GX instead.
That was also his. But I don't want to spoil it for you. Go watch it.
Fair enough. Well, look, that brings us to the end of this week. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again in 2025. We will be back more regularly this year. I do promise we're going to be diving into things. We're going to get some people on from the industry to do some interviews with. So if there's anybody you'd like to hear from or any corners of the industry you want to know more about, leave a comment or write to us, podcast@carexpert.com.au, and let us know, because we'd like to change up the podcast a little bit in 2025 and hopefully do some things a little bit different and more things that you guys would like to see. So if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel on YouTube or give us a follow on whatever platform you're listening to, be it Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And until next time we're back here, James, thanks for coming along.
Thank you, and good night.
Yes, thank you. Good night and good luck. We'll see you next time. And don't forget, don't drive into floodwater. If you're in floods, please don't drive into floodwater. It's the last thing we want to hear about. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.